enjoyed your plenary this morning. A lot of great stuff came out. And I wanted to start out by talking a little bit about that and asking you, you talked about that we are forging a new economy, a new knowledge economy, I think is how you refer to it. I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about that? What does that mean exactly, the knowledge economy?
Well, I think there are a couple things going on that are going to shift the way knowledge gets created, organized, distributed, and used over the next decade. Among them is this really important revolution taking place in self-publishing and self-distribution. We know that there were about 250,000 commercially academic press-produced works last year, about 250,000 small press, and 500,000 self-published. We haven't wrapped our minds or our resources around how to capture and manage that stuff. And I think that's going to be one of the factors. Second, I think many libraries already are beginning to vote with their budgets in terms of where they're going to invest their resources. There's a declining investment in content. I think a lot are relying on consortial or statewide licensing to provide us a core of content. But I think there's a real general unwillingness to buy things that people are not going to probably read, and research libraries also are beginning to collaborate in much more aggressive ways around building those research collections and those global collections. I think also libraries are moving resources into other areas of new impact. In my talk this morning, I mentioned space. It's going to require continuing investment as we build for flexibility. I think staff is going to become a much more important, expertise is going to become a much more important part of the service suite that we provide. And that may or may not mean hiring always librarians. It may mean building a larger portfolio of academic and professional backgrounds in order to get the job done. I also think openness, although I think it has been modestly advanced. I think over the next decade we're going to see more and more institutions, universities, more and more funding agencies bringing expectations to the table in terms of the work of their own faculty. And I think that will shift a lot of the content that we pay for today into a different sphere. Now, whether we will accept what I talked about this morning of a sort of a repository chaos, where these works are being put in lots of different places, and we're not sure which one is the copy of record, which one is going to be cited, which one's going to be preserved, which one's not going to be changed. And that's where the importance of standards, I think, comes into play, and globally accepted identifier strategies that I think will make a huge difference. So I think all of those issues come to push a different type of marketplace for knowledge. I think there will still be a consuming community. I think it will shift over time to the end reader, to the student, to the faculty member, to the person who lives in town. I think some of that's already taking place in some disciplines in some fields. And to me, it retains the vitality and importance of the publisher and the extraordinary value they bring to taking an idea and moving it out ultimately to a well-edited, well-presented product. We have a lot of debate around print versus electronic. I think that's always going to be a tension, although I have to believe over the next 10 years we're going to see more and more of a community reliance on and acceptance of digital methods of reading material. Because the added value that the online presentation allows in terms of integration of functionality, multimedia, interactivity, new generations of young people, I think, will embrace and adapt to that perhaps more aggressively over the next 10 years than we have in our generation. So I think all of those factors and trends dictate a different type of economy for knowledge as we move forward.
You mentioned, and those are all very insightful ideas. One thing you did mention, in fact you said it twice, and I found this particularly interesting, that this economy, there would be no information and service industry targeting libraries.
Yeah.
And I wondered, what does that mean for publishers and library vendors?
Yeah. Well, I think what it means to me is that the marketplace for what publishers and what library technology organizations do will shift from library acquisition to consumer acquisition. I think that will be an important part of the knowledge economy going forward. I also think libraries are investing. In my talk this morning, I outlined a series of maybe a dozen or more technologies that are increasingly relevant to the work of libraries, whether it be geographic information systems or artificial intelligence or mobile tablets and so forth. The whole range, those are not what I would call library technology company products. Those are products that exist in the general marketplace. The things that we have acquired from library vendors generally have fallen under the larger umbrella of library management systems, which in the scheme of things, if you list the technologies that really are viewed by libraries as important and fundamental to their services going forward, library management system, I would argue, has moved way down on the list. It doesn't mean that inventory control is unimportant, but we've built the front ends, the user front ends of a lot of these systems in libraries and in combinations of libraries to enrich discovery and to make it possible for people to refine and truncate and build a different type of individualized search. But I just think that general technologies are redefining what libraries are going to invest in. I also think that open source is going to play a very important role here. Even in the library management system space, I think that there is some potential for that type of open source approach to inventory control to advance. But I do think the types of products that libraries will use will either be purchased in the general marketplace or will be developed through teams of library technologists working together in an open source type of way. So it doesn't mean that those markets disappear. I just think they're directed in different ways.
I see.
How about the impact of all of this on consumers? Right now the library represents a channel so that consumers don't have to look in all areas or be aware of all the possibilities out there. But it also represents an opportunity, an equalizer. If you don't have the money, you can't otherwise acquire something that you could. As we lose that connection, and as these vendors are supplying things directly to users, how is that going to change some of that? Not just for academics, but for other types of libraries.
But I think communities, whether they be academic communities or public communities or school communities, I think there will be a business model that will subsidize individualized access to information, and that individuals will make choices in terms of the type of access they want to enable for themselves, the type of information they want to access and use. And I believe that business model of individualized subsidy in a community has some real potential. It sort of gets rid of all this stuff that we're buying through the library that basically never gets read, never gets cited. There was a Smithsonian Magazine article a couple of years ago that provided some startling numbers about the percentage of journal articles that just never are never used and never cited. And we know that at least in the university press environment, the number of volumes being produced of new scholarly monographs has, over the last decade, continued to plummet, in some cases below 300 copies sold. So I'm not sure we can sustain those models going forward. And I'm not sure libraries need to be in between the knowledge distributors, the publishers, and the knowledge consumers, the public and the university community. you know, we've been saying this for a long time, and we've not made much progress down this path. But I believe that given the economics of libraries, where we have so much that we need to invest in, either institutionally or collectively, that we've got to take a very different approach to content acquisition and content use in our communities. We're seeing libraries co-own collections. It's most obvious today, I think, in these off-site collection storage facilities. We're seeing more libraries co-invest in building collections together. Too Cool, the Columbia-Cornell combination, is a case in point, which has now been triplicated, quadrupled around the country in terms of institutions working together in that way. And so that means that even smaller amounts of material will be purchased, because libraries will be sharing collections in even more rigorous ways, not after the fact, but before the fact, in terms of the selection and acquisition decision. So I think it's going to be a very challenging 10 years for libraries and for publishers, but I don't think that we can sustain the current model. We've been, as I said, we've been like a Greek chorus on the side of the stage screaming at the academic community for decades, and we've made very slow progress. I also said that there's a relationship between quantitative change and qualitative change, and that there's enough quantitative things happening that ultimately will tip over into something dramatically different, and a real qualitative shift in how the knowledge economy works.
Well, this knowledge economy is, as you mentioned, you use terms like a time of upheaval, and you talked about that deconstruction was essential, but you also said that this transformation needed to be measured. And I wonder, what adjustments and changes do librarians need to make to remain viable and to continue contributing to their communities? Well,
we need to get out of the library. We need to be in those places where our users work. I talked about virtual, which is a trite expression, but I think to me, it's in the classroom, it's in the laboratory, it's in the workplace, it's in the hospital, at the hospital. And I think librarians, professional staff, need to be partnering in those arenas with the user community, faculty, students, businesses, and public communities. I also think that we need to focus on the expertise that we bring to the table. And I try to outline a suite of services that I hear scholars and researchers asking for example. And we need to understand those, and we need to, in a measured way, develop those and introduce those into our service suite in working with those communities. I also think that there is I use the word virtuous today, in that we've been sort of islands of libraries. And if we can build that sort of radical approach to collaboration and really co-invest in very different ways than we have historically, our user communities will begin to think beyond the institutional framework, and we'll see the range of services and capacities that the library can deliver to them. They work in a collaborative way, the scholars. Community people work together in collaborative ways, and so libraries, I think, need to be a part of that culture of cooperation.
Well, it sounds like if we play our cards right, we'll have more influence than we've ever had before.
I hope so. That's my aspiration. I think we need to demonstrate impact and value. I think we need to secure respect. We need to be at the tables where decisions are being made. I use the word convener in my title. I think the library needs to be the place where ideas are shared, where issues are debated. Libraries should obviously steer clear of policy positions on things like immigration or gun control or health insurance, et cetera, et cetera. But they can be the place where information is enabled and where the diverse community perspectives on those issues come together, debate them, talk about them, and formulate new community and national policy directions.